Do you know what's really fun? Not letting your opponent use their Pokemon the way they want to by turning off their abilities, and that's exactly what today's deck is going to do. Hey, Nick from 9Card TCG, and today we are looking at a brand new deck from Paldea Evolved. A lot of the cards in here are new, which is really exciting. Well, relatively new, which is really exciting to me personally because it's the first time I'm playing a deck that doesn't have a single Pokemon V in it, and that's really exciting in a way, I guess. But anyway, so we're just going to get right to it. Before we do, I apologize. Allergies are kicking my ass. So if I sound weird or there's weird cuts or anything like that, just know it's because, my white car is very yellow with pollen right now, and it's not a fun time. But anyway, let's get to the deck profile. We are looking at a Ting Lu deck. Ting Lu is a brand new Pokemon EX, well, it will be brand new when Paldea Evolved releases. 240 health, which is pretty nice, a retreat cost of 4, grass weakness, which is really nice, not weak to psychic, and we have 1 attack, land scoop, 3 fighting energies, does 150 damage, and we put 2 damage counters on one of our opponent's benched Pokemon. But why on earth would we use something that's so mid? It's because of the ability Earthen Curse. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's Pokemon that have any damage counters on them have no abilities, except for those pesky Pokemon EX. So it's a little annoying that we can't turn off like Gardevoir EX, but really at the moment, I guess Chien-Pao when this comes out, those are the two that we would really want to turn off. There's no other really good Pokemon EX that's seeing a ton of play or that will see a ton of play, so something to keep in mind. We have 4 Ting Lus because we really want to get those Ting Lus out and in our active spot immediately. 3 fighting energy is kind of a lot, and fighting doesn't have any really good energy acceleration. This is a Pokemon EX, so we can't use something like Arceus V or V-Star to power it up. So what we do have is Koraidon EX. Koraidon has the Dino Cry ability that says we get to put up to 2 basic fighting energies from our discard to our basic fighting Pokemon in play in any way we want. However, if we use this ability, our turn ends. It's, kind of unfortunate, but if we attach for turn to a Ting Lu, and then we can go ahead and, say turn 1, we go ahead and use the Dino Cry, we power up a Ting Lu, we are looking pretty decent. I really hate that that ends your turn. That really kills any momentum from mid game, and that's kind of a problem that this deck might experience. But we'll talk about that. But yeah, the other thing we have is Wild Impact for 220 damage. If you have 2 fighting and a colorless attached, we only have fighting energies in this deck, so you're gonna get 3 fighting energies on this thing and do 220, and then during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. You might be wondering, Nick, how on earth are we gonna get fighting energies in the discard and find our Ting Lu and find our Koraidon? Like that's a tall order, and yes, it is, but this next Pokemon makes it a little bit easier, and that is Squawkabilly EX. Squawkabilly has the Show Off ability once during your turn. If this is your first turn, you may discard your hand and draw 6 cards. You can't use more than 1 Show Off ability each turn. So we throw the Squawkabilly in there, and now all we have to do is, whenever we want, at any point during our turn, we can use Show Off to discard our hand, and then we get some fighting energies in the discard, we see 6 new cards, maybe we play a Professor's Research, and that's another 7 card, or our hand in the discard, and we see another set of 7 cards, Ultra Ball, all these kind of things are going to help us discard stuff so that we can get those fighting energies in the discard, find our Koraidon, and then be able to, just start turning off abilities. One of the ways we're going to be able to turn off abilities is with the Flying Entry Hawlucha. This Hawlucha, when you play this card from your hand to the bench, you may choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put 1 damage counter on each of them. This is a great way for if we go second, we can still use Ting Lu to lock our opponent's Pokemon abilities. So for example, we have a Ting Lu in the active. We go ahead and play Hawlucha, put 1 damage counter on 2 of our opponent's benched Pokemon. Ting Lu's ability now takes effect, and then we can use something like Koraidon to power up the Ting Lu so that the next turn we can use Land Scoop potentially and start attacking. It's a really nice way of, even if we go second, still putting a lot of pressure on our opponent to clear those damage counters very, very quickly. Our last Pokemon is a Radiant Alakazam with the Painful Spoons ability. Once during a turn, you may move up to 2 damage counters from one of your opponent's Pokemon to another one of their Pokemon. This is a great way for, just for example, we have Ting-Lu in the active, we have Radiant Alakazam. On the previous turn, we used Land Scoop to do 150 to our opponent's active. They hit into us, they don't KO. Well, now we do another 150. We're probably going to be taking a KO, right? 300 damage is usually overkill. So we can move 2 damage counters from our opponent's active to another Pokemon so we can ensure that they stay ability locked with the Ting-Lu. So it's just a cool way of ensuring that we're able to spread these damage counters out to as much of our opponent's Pokemon as possible to ensure that none of them can use their ability. Next up are the item cards, and we have 2 copies of Escape Rope, and we also have 2 copies of Switch Cart. All of our Pokemon are basic, so when we use Switch Cart, we get to go ahead and heal 20 damage, which is pretty nice. Escape Rope is also really good for just kind of moving Pokemon around. Like we saw before, Ting-Lu has a retreat cost of 4, so having some type of mobility is really, really important. Speaking of those Pokemon, we have to be able to find them, so we have 4 copies of Nest Ball and 4 copies of Ultra Ball. All of our Pokemon are basic Pokemon, and with the exception of Hawlucha, we can use Nest Ball to get all of our Pokemon. Unlike things like Lumineon or something like that needs to be played from hand to bench, we can use Nest Ball to find all of our Pokemon, which is really, really nice. Ultra Ball is going to allow us to find any Pokemon we want, including the Hawlucha, so we can use its ability to put some damage counters on some stuff. We mentioned before that fighting doesn't have a lot of great energy acceleration, but we do have the Gutsy Pickaxe card, which lets us reveal the top card of our deck. If it's a fighting energy, we can attach it to one of our benched fighting Pokemon. If it's not a fighting energy, we just put it into our hand, which is a really nice just play this card, draw 1. And speaking of play this card, draw 1, we have 4 copies of Trekking Shoes. Look at the top card of your deck. You may put that card into your hand. If you don't, discard that card and draw a card. So this is a really nice synergy with something like the Koraidon EX. We draw into a fighting energy. Well, if we already have one in hand and we don't want to, we can't attach too many, we don't want to clog up our hand with fighting energies, we can just go ahead and discard it, draw an extra card, and now use Koraidon's Dino Cry ability to get that fighting energy out of the discard. So those are our item cards. Very quickly, the tools, we have Experience Share. Whenever your active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack by one of your opponent's Pokemon, you can move a basic energy from that Pokemon to the Pokemon this card is attached to. This is really important because if we have a Ting-Lu on the bench and we have a Ting-Lu in the active, well, we have 3 energies on this active Ting-Lu. When it gets knocked out, one of those energies is going to get moved over to the benched Ting-Lu. And this is really nice because if we do have a way of, accelerating energies with Gutsy Pickaxe, we have ways of accelerating energy with Koraidon, we can go ahead and just slowly attach for turn, use Experience Share, use all the tools available to us in this deck to ensure that our Pokemon get powered up appropriately and kind of quickly. We do also have 2 Charm of Courage. The basic Pokemon this card is attached to gets an extra 50 health. This is basically a Cape of Toughness, but we can attach it to our Pokemon EX. So now this 240 health Ting-Lu becomes 290 health, which is really nice and makes it just a little bit harder to KO. We really want to ensure that we get damage counters onto our opponent's Pokemon as quickly as possible and also really start to stack those damage counters for 2 reasons. 1, Land Scoop doesn't really do a lot of damage, neither does the Wild Impact on the Koraidon. Those are our only 2 attackers, so we want to try to stack some damage to make the KOs a little bit easier, make sure our math lines up. And 2, we really want to turn our opponent's Pokemon abilities off, so putting damage counters on them as quickly as possible, or as many damage counters as possible, makes it a little bit easier, and that's why we run 3 copies of Gatedraw Bog as our stadium. Whenever a player puts a basic Pokemon from their hand onto their bench, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. It is worth noting that if your opponent plays a Nest Ball to go ahead and get their own Ting-Lu with Gatedraw Bog in play, they do not take the damage. Nest Ball says it goes from the deck to the bench. Gatedraw Bog specifically says it has to go from the hand to the bench. So if your opponent plays it from their hand, 2 damage counters. If they get it with Nest Ball or some other thing that says goes directly from the deck or discard onto the bench, they don't take the damage, so something to keep in mind. Next up are the supporters. We have 1 copy of Zinnia's Resolve. You can only play this card if you discard 2 of the cards from your hand. Draw a card for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play. This is really nice. A lot of decks right now want to have full benches, so they have 6 Pokemon in play. Gardevoir, Mew, Lost Zone, all those, even Lugia decks often have 4, 5, 6 Pokemon in play. So we can discard 2 cards. They could be energy cards. They could be things we don't need, maybe. And then see some new cards. Pretty nice. Again, it's really great for that first turn especially, so that we can go ahead and find more ways of discarding those fighting energies. You cannot have enough ways to get those fighting energies in the discard turn 1 for that Dino Cry, because you really don't want to use Dino Cry later in the game if you don't have to. 2 copies of Boss's Order, so we can go ahead and take one of our opponent's bench Pokemon, bring it into the active. It's a really good way of just, again, if we stack some damage counters with Gate Draw Bog and the Hawlucha, the Land Scoop puts 2 damage counters on things, maybe we can soften something up, like a Lumineon, like a Squawk ability, take an easy KO with Land Scoop, or even Wild Impact if we can. So Boss's Order is really nice. We also have 2 copies of Penny. Put one of your basic Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. This is great for something like Ting-Lu, especially if it has the Cape of Toughness reprint, the Charm of Courage attached. Well, it has 290 health. If our opponent doesn't knock this thing out in 1 hit, we can go ahead and play Penny to bring this up, all the cards attached to it. That includes the tool, all the energies, and promote a new Ting-Lu that hopefully has at least 2 energies onto it. Then we can go ahead and attach the 3rd energy for hand, and we can attach the Charm of Courage to keep this one at 290 health and just make it really difficult for our opponent to take some KOs. We have 3 copies of Iono. It's a brand new supporter. It's a combination of Marnie and N. Each player shuffles their hand and puts it to the bottom of their deck. Then each player draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards. This is great for later in the game. Our opponent knocks out a Ting-Lu. Maybe they boss up whatever. They just take like 3, 4 prizes. We can Iono them down to 2. Ting-Lu and our Gate Draw Bog or Hawlucha, all that kind of stuff. Starting to stack those damage counters. Now they can't use their abilities, so they can't use Bibarel to fill up their hand. They can't use, something like that Chiampao to search out energies. And they only got 2 cards in hand because we Ionoed them after they took a couple of prize cards. It's just a really nice way of trying to lock down that game later, because one of the big issues with Ting-Lu is that we do need some turns to set up. We do need a turn or 2 to start powering it up. 3 fighting energies is a lot to ask for. 150 doesn't really do a lot of damage, so now we can go ahead. We need that first turn or 2 to start setting up. We can kind of use this as a really nice comeback card for later in the game after our opponent takes the KO or 2. Well, now we can really start to put our game plan into effect. And this is very much a go ahead, take your 2 prizes, take 3 prizes, because later in the game it's going to come back to bite you. And that's what Iono seeks to do. And our last supporter is 4 copies of Professor's Research. Again, sometimes you just need to ditch your hand and draw 7 new cards. It's a super powerful draw supporter. It allows us to get a bunch of things into the discard, like a bunch of energies, and we just like to see the most number of cards possible. So sometimes you just have to play the Professor's Research. And at this point, we've talked about energies a lot. How many energies do we run? We are actually running 12 basic fighting energies, and that's the entire deck. So there you have it, Ting-Lu. It's not really control, it's more of like a disruption deck. I think it's really cool. I don't know how good it's going to be. For my recollection, it hasn't been doing super well in Japan. But maybe that's just not the way they play. Maybe they want to try other things. I don't really know. But either way, let me know your thoughts on Ting-Lu. Is this something that you're worried about? Are you excited to play it? What deck are you most excited for from Paldea Evolved? Tell me in the comments, like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of stuff. Tells YouTube this is a good channel. Other people should watch it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.